For 12 years I built my consulting business from nothing. While my brother Jake lived in our parents' basement playing video games until he was 27, I worked 18-hour days building client relationships and developing my expertise in corporate restructuring. Every contract I landed, every late-night project I completed, every weekend I sacrificed went toward building something sustainable and profitable. By the time I turned 32, my business was generating enough revenue that I needed to expand. I'd been operating as a solo consultant, but the demand for my services had grown beyond what one person could handle. I needed to hire additional consultants, lease proper office space, and invest in technology infrastructure. The expansion would require a significant capital injection, but my projections showed it would triple my revenue within 2 years. I'd saved $150,000 specifically for this business expansion. Every penny came from profits I'd reinvested instead of spending on luxury items or expensive vacations. While my friends bought new cars and designer clothes, I drove a 10-year-old Honda and shopped at discount stores. This money represented not just my future, but validation that all those years of sacrifice had been worth something. The funds were sitting in a high-yield business savings account at First National Bank. I'd been earning decent interest while I finalized my expansion plans and prepared to make the necessary investments. The account was in my business name, but I'd added Jake as an authorized user 2 years earlier during a period when I was traveling internationally for clients and needed someone who could handle emergency transactions if something happened to me. I should have removed his access after that trip ended. But Jake was my brother and family trust runs deep. Jake had always struggled with responsibility and financial management. After dropping out of college twice, he'd bounced between entry-level jobs, never staying anywhere longer than 8 months. Our parents enabled his lifestyle by letting him live rent-free in their basement and covering his car insurance, phone bill, and most of his living expenses. At 31, he had no savings, no career prospects, and no apparent motivation to change his situation. But I never criticized him openly. Family loyalty meant accepting people as they were and offering support when possible. I'd always believed that Jake would eventually find his direction in life, and I wanted to be there for him when he did. Last November, Jake announced at Sunday dinner that he'd met someone special. Her name was Ashley, and she was everything he'd been looking for in a partner. She was beautiful, intelligent, adventurous, and best of all, she believed in his potential. They'd been dating for 3 months, and Jake was convinced she was the one. Ashley had recently returned from studying abroad in Italy, Jake explained, and she'd been telling him incredible stories about European culture, art, and history. She thought Jake would benefit enormously from international travel experience. It would broaden his perspective, help him discover his passion, and give him confidence to pursue bigger opportunities. She'd found an amazing 3-week European tour package that visited 8 countries. The timing was perfect. They could go in December during the holiday season when everything would be decorated and festive. The total cost for both of them would be $22,000, including flights, hotels, meals, and guided tours. Jake had never been outside the United States. He was genuinely excited about the opportunity to travel and spend extended time with Ashley. The problem was that he didn't have $22,000. His latest job at an electronics store had ended in October, and his savings account contained approximately $340. "I know it's a lot of money," Jake said at dinner, "but Ashley thinks this could be life-changing for me. She's got connections in Europe who might be able to help me find work opportunities over there." Mom looked concerned. "Honey, how would you pay for something like that?" "I was hoping maybe I could borrow some money from the family. I'll pay it back once I figure out my career situation." Dad shifted uncomfortably. $22,000 is a significant amount, son. "I know. But think of it as an investment in my future. Ashley says travel experiences like this are what separate successful people from people who stay stuck in their hometown forever." I felt a familiar knot forming in my stomach. Jake had borrowed money from family members dozens of times over the years, always with promises to pay it back once things turned around. None of those loans had ever been repaid, but family members continued lending to him because he was charming and optimistic and genuinely believed each new opportunity would be his breakthrough. "Jake, have you looked into getting a personal loan from a bank?" I asked carefully. He laughed. "Banks don't give loans to people like me. I don't have credit history or collateral or any of that stuff they require." What about getting a job first, saving money for a few months and then planning the trip? Ashley can't wait that long. She's got other people interested in traveling with her, and this tour package has limited availability. It's now or never. The conversation moved on to other topics, but I could see the disappointment in Jake's face for the rest of the evening. When I left my parents' house that night, Jake walked me to my car. Emma, I know you think I'm irresponsible with money, but this really could change everything for me. Ashley sees potential in me that no one else has ever seen. Jake, I want you to be happy and successful. But $22,000 is a huge amount for a vacation. It's not just a vacation. It's an investment in my personal growth and my relationship with Ashley. She's the first woman who's ever believed I could amount to something significant. I looked at my brother's hopeful face and felt my resolve weakening. Maybe Ashley was right. Maybe Jake needed this experience to gain confidence and direction. Maybe I was being too conservative and practical. Let me think about it, I said finally. Jake's face lit up. Really? Emma, you're the best sister in the world. I promise I'll pay back every penny with interest. 2 weeks later, I got a call from Jake while I was in a client meeting. He sounded panicked. Emma, I need to talk to you about the loan situation. Ashley found out that the tour company is offering a special discount if we book by tomorrow. Instead of $22,000, we can get the entire package for $18,000 if we pay the full amount up front. Jake, I haven't agreed to lend you any money yet. I know, but this is an incredible deal. We'd save $4,000 just by acting quickly. Ashley's other friends are putting pressure on her to choose travel companions who can move fast on opportunities like this. I felt manipulated, but I also understood the logic. Saving $4,000 was significant, and Jake seemed genuinely motivated about this relationship and travel experience. If I were to consider lending you money, I'd need to see a written agreement with repayment terms. Absolutely. Whatever you want. Ashley's dad is a lawyer and he could help us draft something official. And you'd need to commit to a realistic timeline for paying me back. Of course. I'm thinking 6 months maximum. Ashley's confident that this trip will open doors for me professionally. Against my better judgment, I found myself agreeing to lend Jake $18,000 for his European vacation. We met the next day to sign a promissory note that Ashley's father had prepared. The document looked professional and included clear repayment terms. $3,000 per month for 6 months, starting in February. I transferred the money from my personal savings account, not my business expansion fund. Even though I was taking a financial risk, I kept my business plans completely separate from family loans. Jake and Ashley left for Europe on December 15th. For 3 weeks, my social media feeds were filled with photos of them visiting museums in Paris, eating pasta in Rome, touring castles in Germany and skiing in Switzerland. They looked incredibly happy together, and Jake seemed more confident and enthusiastic than I'd seen him in years. Maybe this really would be the experience that changed his life trajectory. They returned on January 5th, full of stories about their adventures and connections they'd made with other travelers. Ashley had loved showing Jake her favorite places from her study abroad experience. Jake had discovered a passion for European history and architecture. They were already talking about planning their next international trip together. The first $3,000 payment was due on February 1st. When that date passed without any communication from Jake, I waited a week before reaching out to him. Hey Jake, just checking in about the loan repayment. The first payment was due last week. Oh right, sorry Emma. Things have been crazy since we got back. Ashley and I are trying to figure out our next steps together, and I'm looking into some job opportunities that came up through people we met in Europe. That's great. When do you think you'll be able to make the first payment? Probably within the next couple weeks. I just need to get my finances organized. 3 weeks later, Jake still hadn't made any payment. When I called him, he sounded stressed and defensive. Emma, I know I owe you money, but Ashley and I are going through some relationship issues right now. She's been distant since we got back, and I think she's questioning whether our lifestyles are compatible long-term. I'm sorry to hear that, but the loan repayment isn't dependent on your relationship status. I know. It's just that I spent all my remaining savings on gifts for Ashley during the trip, and now I'm completely broke. I need to find a job before I can start paying you back. By April, Ashley had broken up with Jake and started dating someone else. Jake was devastated and had moved back into our parents' basement. He hadn't made a single payment on the $18,000 loan, and he'd stopped returning my calls. At our family Easter dinner, Jake looked miserable. He'd gained weight, wasn't taking care of his appearance, and seemed to have lost all the confidence and enthusiasm he'd gained during his European adventure. "I'm sorry about Ashley," I said privately when we had a moment alone. "She said I wasn't ambitious enough for her," Jake replied bitterly. "She said the trip convinced her that she needed someone with more financial stability and career direction." That must have been painful to hear. The worst part is that I spent $3,000 on a necklace for her in Paris. It was supposed to be a symbol of our commitment to building a future together. She returned it to me when she broke up with me. I stared at him. "You spent $3,000 on jewelry during a trip that I paid for?" Ashley said it was important to invest in our relationship. She said successful couples make bold romantic gestures for each other. "Jake, that money was supposed to be for the tour package, not for expensive gifts. There was money left over after we paid for everything. I thought you'd want me to use it to make Ashley happy." I realized that Jake had fundamentally misunderstood the entire loan arrangement. In his mind, I'd given him $18,000 to spend however he wanted during his European adventure. He'd never considered that the money was specifically for travel expenses and that any leftover funds should have been returned to me. "Jake, we need to talk about the repayment schedule. You've missed 3 payments so far." "I know, and I feel terrible about it. But I don't have a job right now, and Ashley's breakup really messed with my head. I need some time to get back on my feet." "How much time?" "Maybe 6 months. I need to figure out my career situation and get my emotional life stabilized." 6 months stretched into 8 months, then 10 months. Jake got a part-time job at a coffee shop but claimed he couldn't afford loan payments because he was helping our parents with household expenses. He'd started dating someone new, which required money for dinners and entertainment. He'd bought a newer used car because his old one had broken down. Meanwhile, I'd been forced to delay my business expansion because I couldn't access the $18,000 I'd loaned to Jake. Client demand continued growing, but I couldn't hire additional consultants or lease better office space without the capital I'd planned to use. I was turning down potential contracts because I didn't have the capacity to handle them. Every month that passed represented lost revenue and missed opportunities. I calculated that delaying my expansion was costing me approximately $8,000 per month in potential income. Jake's European vacation was becoming increasingly expensive for my business. At our family Christmas dinner, Jake seemed to have fully recovered from his breakup with Ashley. He was dating someone named Melissa now, and they were planning to move in together after the holidays. He'd been promoted to shift supervisor at the coffee shop, which came with a small raise and more consistent hours. I decided it was time to have a direct conversation about loan repayment. "Jake, it's been over a year since you borrowed the money for Europe. We need to establish a realistic payment plan." Jake looked uncomfortable. "Emma, I've been meaning to talk to you about that. The thing is, my financial situation is still pretty tight. Between helping mom and dad and getting ready to move in with Melissa, I don't really have extra money for loan payments right now." The loan agreement specified 6 months of $3,000 payments. "You haven't made a single payment." "I know, and I feel bad about it. But honestly, that payment schedule was never realistic for someone in my financial situation. Ashley's dad probably didn't understand my income level when he drafted that document." "What payment schedule would be realistic? Maybe $100 a month? I could probably manage that without affecting my other financial obligations." I stared at him in disbelief. At $100 per month, it would take 15 years for Jake to repay the $18,000 loan, assuming he never missed a payment. "Jake, at that rate, you'd be paying me back until you're 46 years old. I know it's not ideal, but it's what I can afford right now. Maybe I'll be able to increase the payments once my career situation improves." "You've been saying your career situation will improve for over a decade." Jake's face flushed with anger. "Emma, you make way more money than I do. $18,000 is probably nothing to you. For me, it's a huge amount that I can't just pull out of thin air. If $18,000 was nothing to me, I wouldn't have asked you to sign a promissory note. Look, I'm doing the best I can with my life. Not everyone can be successful like you. Some of us have to struggle more to find our path." The conversation was going nowhere productive. Jake had convinced himself that his financial struggles justified breaking his commitment to repay the loan. In his mind, I was wealthy enough to absorb the loss, so holding him accountable was unreasonable. After dinner, I sat in my car for 20 minutes trying to process the conversation. Jake had essentially told me that he had no intention of repaying the loan according to our original agreement. He'd proposed a payment plan that would take 15 years to complete and showed no understanding of how his broken commitment had affected my business plans. I'd been subsidizing Jake's lifestyle for over a year while he pursued romantic relationships and delayed his career development. Meanwhile, my business expansion had stalled and I was losing thousands of dollars in potential revenue every month. That night, I made a decision that would change everything. I pulled out my laptop and logged into my bank account. For the past 14 months, I'd been making automatic payments on Jake's mortgage. Not his rent, his mortgage. Jake didn't know that I was the one keeping his house out of foreclosure. 2 years earlier, Jake had somehow qualified for a first-time homebuyer loan and purchased a small house in a decent neighborhood. The monthly mortgage payment was $1,847, which was more than Jake's monthly income from most of his part-time jobs. Within 6 months, he'd fallen behind on payments and received foreclosure warnings. Jake had come to me panicking about losing his house. He'd begged me to help him figure out a solution. The mortgage company was willing to work with him if he could bring his account current and demonstrate consistent payment ability going forward. I'd paid $11,000 to bring Jake's mortgage current, and then I'd set up automatic monthly payments from my business account to cover his mortgage going forward. Jake believed that his mortgage company had restructured his loan with more favorable terms. He had no idea that I was paying his housing costs every month. I justified this arrangement by telling myself that Jake needed stability to get his life together. Having secure housing would give him the confidence to pursue better employment opportunities and develop financial responsibility. I'd expected that within a year or two Jake would be earning enough to take over his own mortgage payments. Instead, Jake had used his financial stability to justify taking expensive vacations and pursuing relationships with women who expected him to spend money he didn't actually have. I canceled the automatic mortgage payment that was scheduled for January 1st. 3 weeks later, Jake called me sounding frantic. "Emma, something weird is happening with my mortgage company. They're saying I missed my January payment and that my account is becoming delinquent. But I thought we had that restructuring agreement that made my payments more affordable." "What did the mortgage company tell you exactly?" "They said my January payment was returned for insufficient funds, which doesn't make sense because I thought the payments were being automatically deducted from some kind of escrow account." "Did you ask them to clarify the payment arrangement?" "I tried, but they kept asking me questions about account numbers and payment sources that I don't understand. They said they need to speak with the account holder who's been making the payments." I stayed silent. "Emma, do you know anything about this? Did you help me set up some kind of payment system that I forgot about?" "Jake, I've been paying your mortgage for the past 14 months. The silence on the other end of the phone lasted for nearly 30 seconds. "What do you mean you've been paying my mortgage? The $11,000 I gave you to bring your account current? That was my money. The monthly payments that have been keeping your house out of foreclosure? Those have been coming from my business account." I thought the mortgage company restructured my loan." "They did restructure it. The restructuring required someone to make consistent monthly payments. I've been making those payments." "Why didn't you tell me?" "Because you needed to believe you could handle homeownership independently. I thought it would give you confidence and stability." "But Emma, if you've been paying my mortgage, that means you've been living rent-free for over a year while you spent money on European vacations and expensive gifts for girlfriends." Jake was quiet again. "What happens now?" he finally asked. "That depends on you. If you want to keep your house, you'll need to start making the mortgage payments yourself." "Emma, you know I can't afford $1,800 a month on my coffee shop salary." "Then you'll need to find a solution. Get a better job, find a roommate, or sell the house." "But if I default on the mortgage, it'll destroy my credit score." "That's a natural consequence of buying a house you couldn't afford." "Emma, please. I know I screwed up with the loan money, but losing my house would be devastating. Can't we work something out?" "Jake, I've been working something out for 14 months. I've been subsidizing your lifestyle while you broke commitments to me and made excuses about why you couldn't take financial responsibility. What if I start paying you back for both the loan and the mortgage assistance? I could do like $200 a month." At $200 per month, Jake would need 45 years to repay the money I'd given him, assuming he never missed a payment. Jake, I'm not a bank. I'm not in the business of providing long-term financing for people who don't honor their agreements. So you're just going to let me lose my house? I'm going to stop paying for your house. What happens next is entirely up to you. Jake hung up on me. The next morning, I received angry text messages from both of our parents. Jake had told them that I was threatening to put him into foreclosure over a small family loan. He'd portrayed the situation as me being vindictive and unreasonable about money. I called my mother and explained the actual situation. I told her about the $18,000 loan that Jake had never started repaying, and I told her about the 14 months of mortgage payments I'd been making without Jake's knowledge. Emma, I had no idea you were helping Jake with his house payments. He didn't know either. I thought it would help him gain financial stability and confidence. How much money have you given him in total? I did the calculation. Between the loan and the mortgage payments, about $43,000. Mom was silent for a long time. Emma, that's a lot of money. It's money I could have used to expand my business. Instead, I've been subsidizing Jake's lifestyle while he made excuses about why he couldn't repay me. What do you want to happen now? I want Jake to start taking responsibility for his own financial obligations. If he can't afford his mortgage, he needs to make adult decisions about his housing situation. And if he loses the house? Then he'll learn what happens when you buy something you can't afford and don't make the payments. 2 weeks later, Jake received his foreclosure notice. He had 60 days to bring his account current or the bank would begin proceedings to reclaim the property. Jake called me crying. Emma, the foreclosure notice says I owe $3,000 to bring my account current, plus I need to demonstrate ability to make ongoing payments. I don't have $3,000 and I definitely can't prove that I can afford $1,800 a month. What are your options? I could try to sell the house, but the realtor says it might take 3 to 6 months to find a buyer. I could try to find a roommate, but I'd still need to come up with the back payment amount. Or I could try to get a personal loan, but my credit score has been dropping because of missed payments. Those all sound like reasonable options to explore. Emma, will you help me? I know I've been irresponsible, but losing my house would ruin my credit for years. It would affect my ability to rent apartments, get jobs, everything. I thought about Jake's request. He was asking me to solve another financial crisis that resulted from his poor decision-making. If I bailed him out again, he'd learn that there were no real consequences for breaking financial commitments to family members. Jake, I've already helped you by paying over $40,000 toward expenses you couldn't afford. I'm not going to continue subsidizing your lifestyle. But I'll pay you back this time. I swear on Mom's life that I'll honor whatever agreement we make. You swore that last time too. This is different. Losing my house has made me realize how serious this is. I'm ready to make real changes. What changes specifically? I'm going to get a second job. Melissa and I are going to move in together and split expenses. I'm going to create a budget and stick to it. Jake, you should have done all of those things before you bought a house you couldn't afford. I know. I was immature and irresponsible. But I've learned my lesson now. Your lesson shouldn't come at my expense. Jake sold his house in March for $185,000. After paying off the remaining mortgage balance, closing costs and realtor fees, he walked away with about $23,000 in equity. He used $18,000 of that money to repay the loan from his European vacation, exactly 1 year and 3 months after it was originally due. He gave me the remaining $5,000 as partial repayment for the mortgage assistance I'd provided. At $5,000 out of the $25,000 I'd paid toward his mortgage, I recovered about 20% of that money. Jake and Melissa rented an apartment together, and Jake got a second job at a restaurant to increase his income. For the first time in his adult life, he was working full-time hours and managing his own expenses without family assistance. But he was bitter about the entire experience. At family gatherings, he would make comments about how some people care more about money than family, and how he'd learned that financial success can make people heartless. Our parents were caught in the middle, understanding both perspectives but wishing we could find a way to reconcile. They suggested family counseling to help us work through our financial disagreements. I don't think this is about money, I told them. It's about accountability. Jake has spent his entire adult life making financial commitments he couldn't keep, And family members have always bailed him out. That pattern needed to end. But he did pay you back eventually, Mom pointed out. He paid me back with money he got from selling an asset that I'd helped him purchase and maintain. Without my mortgage payments, he would have lost that house to foreclosure and had no equity to access. So in a way it worked out fairly for everyone. It worked out because I forced accountability. If I'd continued paying his mortgage indefinitely, he'd still be living beyond his means and expecting family members to cover the difference. 6 months later, Jake got promoted to assistant manager at the restaurant. His increased income allowed him and Melissa to move to a nicer apartment and start saving money for the first time in their relationship. At Christmas dinner, Jake approached me privately. "Emma, I owe you an apology. When I lost the house, I was angry and blamed you for being unsympathetic. But living within my actual means has been better for me than I expected." "How so?" "Melissa and I have a real partnership now because we're both contributing equally to our expenses. I'm not constantly stressed about money because I'm not trying to maintain a lifestyle I can't afford. And I feel better about myself because I'm earning what I have instead of relying on family subsidies. I'm glad you're in a better place. I want you to know that I understand why you stopped helping me. I was taking advantage of your generosity and using it as an excuse to avoid growing up financially. Jake, I never wanted you to struggle. I wanted you to succeed independently. I know that now. And I want to pay you back the rest of the money I owe you from the mortgage assistance." "That's not necessary. Consider it a gift toward your education in financial responsibility." "No, I want to pay it back. It might take a few years, but I want to honor my debts to you." Jake did pay me back $500 per month for 3.5 years. Not because I demanded it, but because he'd learned that keeping financial commitments was essential to maintaining self-respect and family relationships. The European vacation that started this entire situation turned out to be educational after all. Not because it exposed Jake to international culture, but because it forced both of us to confront the difference between enabling and supporting family members. Jake learned that financial independence was more satisfying than financial dependence, even when dependence was more comfortable. And I learned that sometimes the most loving thing you can do for family is refuse to shield them from the consequences of their choices. The $43,000 I'd invested in Jake's financial education was expensive, but it taught both of us lessons that were worth far more than the money itself.
"Pack your bags, Emma. Your time living off my brother's wealth is over." Jessica's voice rang through the house, dripping with satisfaction. I stood in my kitchen, gripping my coffee mug as my sister-in-law paraded around like she owned the place. Behind her, my husband Marcus leaned against the doorframe, arms crossed, wearing that expensive new watch his 24-year-old assistant had probably picked out. My name is Emma Sullivan, and at 35, I was watching my 12-year marriage crumble while my sister-in-law took inventory of what she claimed her brother's mistress would want to keep. "You can't just throw me out," I said calmly, taking another sip of my coffee. The familiar taste grounded me even as Jessica's shrill laughter pierced the air. "Actually, we can. Marcus never registered your marriage properly, did you, brother dear?" She turned to him with a triumphant smile. "Which means technically, you were never really married. Everything belongs to him." Marcus finally spoke, his voice carrying that newfound coldness I'd grown familiar with over the past few months. "Megan needs a fresh start, Emma. And this house, well, it's perfect for her. Young, modern, unlike some things around here." I felt the sting of his words but kept my expression neutral. After 15 years together, 12 of them married, Marcus had decided his assistant Megan was his future. The same Megan who'd been sending him late-night texts for months. The same Megan who'd somehow convinced him that our marriage registration had been mishandled. Jessica circled the kitchen island, her designer heels clicking against the hardwood floors that I'd chosen 3 years ago during our renovation. "You know what's funny?" she mused, running her finger along the marble countertop. "All those years you spent playing the perfect wife, acting like you belonged in our family. And now look, you'll be homeless by the weekend." I placed my mug in the sink, taking care to rinse it thoroughly. Some habits die hard. "Is that what you think?" "Oh please," Jessica scoffed. "Don't try to act tough now. We all know you came from nothing. No family money, no connections, just a small-town girl who got lucky with my brother." "Well, your luck's run out." Marcus shifted uncomfortably. For a moment, I caught a glimpse of the man I'd fallen in love with all those years ago. the one who used to defend me against his sister's casual cruelty. But that man disappeared as quickly as he'd surfaced. "Emma," he said, attempting to sound reasonable, "you can stay with your friend Sarah until you figure things out. I'll even give you some money too." "How generous," I interrupted, my voice steady. "But that won't be necessary." Jessica laughed again, the sound reminiscent of breaking glass. "Are you delusional? This house belongs to the Sullivan family. Our grandmother left it to Marcus. You have no claim to it." I walked to the study, aware of their confused stares following me. The antique desk by the window had been my favorite spot in the house. Not that Jessica or Marcus ever noticed. They were too busy counting their inherited wealth to appreciate the actual treasures their grandmother had left behind. "You know," I said, opening the desk's hidden compartment, "your grandmother and I used to have tea here every Wednesday. She loved telling stories about the family history, about building this estate from nothing." I pulled out a sealed envelope, aged but intact. She also loved to talk about trust and loyalty. Marcus stepped forward, his brow furrowed. "What are you talking about?" "What's that?" "This." I held up the envelope. "This is the real family trust document. The one your grandmother amended 3 months before she died. The one she gave me for safekeeping because, in her words, only someone who truly loves this house will protect its legacy." Jessica's face paled. "You're lying. All the trust documents are with our family lawyer." "Are they?" I smiled, remembering the last conversation I'd had with Marcus's grandmother. She'd seen right through her grandchildren's materialistic facade. "Maybe you should call Mr. Patterson. He helped your grandmother make these changes after all." Marcus reached for the envelope, but I pulled it back. "Don't worry," I said, gathering my keys. "Mr. Patterson has copies. In fact, he's expecting my call." I headed for the door, pausing to look back at their stunned faces. "Oh, and Jessica, you might want to hold off on measuring for new curtains. Something tells me Megan won't be needing them." As I walked to my car, I could hear Jessica's shrill voice demanding answers from Marcus. But I wasn't worried. Their grandmother had taught me more than just the value of family history. She taught me the importance of being prepared. I pulled out my phone and dialed Mr. Patterson's number. It was time to show them exactly what their grandmother's legacy really meant. Mr. Patterson's office hadn't changed in the 15 years I'd known him. The same leather chairs, the same towering bookshelves, even the same slight scent of pipe tobacco that reminded me so much of Marcus's grandmother. The only difference today was the tension in the air as Marcus and Jessica sat across from me, their faces a mix of anger and barely concealed panic. "This must be some kind of mistake," Jessica insisted, her manicured nails drumming against the armrest. "Grandmother would never." "Actually," Mr. Patterson interrupted, adjusting his wire-rimmed glasses, "Mrs. Sullivan was quite clear about her wishes." He opened the trust document I kept safe all these years, along with his own copy. 3 months before her passing, she made significant amendments to the family trust. Marcus leaned forward, his jaw tight. "What kind of amendments?" The elderly lawyer cleared his throat. "The main property, including the house and surrounding grounds, was placed in a separate trust. The sole trustee." He paused, looking directly at me, his Emma. "That's impossible." Jessica shot up from her chair. "She's not even legally married to Marcus. She's nobody." Mr. Patterson raised an eyebrow. "Regarding the marriage, I have some clarification there as well." He pulled out another document. "Your grandmother personally ensured their marriage was properly registered. She kept a copy here in my office." I watched the color drain from Marcus's face. All his plans, all his assumptions about our invalid marriage crumbled in an instant. "But why?" Marcus finally asked, his voice barely above a whisper. "Why would grandmother do this?" "Perhaps," Mr. Patterson said, "you should read her letter." He handed Marcus an envelope I'd never seen before. Marcus's hands shook as he read aloud. "My dearest grandchildren, if you're reading this, then Emma has finally opened the envelope I entrusted to her. I've watched for years as you took our family's legacy for granted, measuring its worth only in dollars and cents. But Emma, she understood. She spent time with me, listened to our family's stories, appreciated the history in every room of that house. While you saw property values, she saw memories. While you counted square footage, she preserved photographs and restored old furniture. The truth is, the Sullivan legacy isn't about money. It's about honor, dedication, and love. Emma has shown more of these qualities than either of you." Marcus, my dear boy, if you're reading this with your wife by your side, cherishing what you've built together, then perhaps I was wrong. But if you're here because you've forgotten the value of loyalty and family, then I made the right choice. The house and the responsibility of preserving our family's true legacy belongs to Emma. With love and hope for wisdom, Grandmother Sullivan. The silence that followed was deafening. Jessica had sunk back into her chair, her earlier bravado completely deflated. Marcus stared at the letter, reading it over and over, as if hoping the words would somehow change. There's more, Mr. Patterson added, shuffling through his papers. Mrs. Sullivan also left specific instructions about the family's business holdings. Jessica's head snapped up. The company's shares. Yes. Upon any attempt to contest Emma's position as trustee, or any proven infidelity within the marriage, he glanced meaningfully at Marcus. 30% of the Sullivan Group shares would be transferred to the charitable foundation Emma helps run. I sat there, absorbing the magnitude of what Marcus's grandmother had done. She hadn't just protected me, she'd ensured that her family's legacy would be preserved one way or another. She knew, Marcus said suddenly, looking at me. Somehow she knew I would. That I might. She knew people, I corrected gently. She understood that sometimes we need consequences to remind us of what matters. Jessica stood up abruptly. This isn't over. We can contest this, Marcus. She can't just. Actually, Mr. Patterson interjected. Any legal contest would trigger the share transfer clause immediately. The foundation would become a major stakeholder in Sullivan Group. Is that what you want, Jessica? As Jessica sank back into her chair, defeated, I thought about all the Wednesday afternoons I'd spent with their grandmother, drinking tea and listening to her stories. She taught me about more than just family history. She taught me about strength, patience, and the importance of standing your ground. I gathered my belongings and stood up. Mr. Patterson, thank you for everything. Marcus, Jessica, I'll be at the house if you need to collect any personal items. Just call first. As I reached the door, Marcus called out, Emma, wait. Please. We can talk about this. I turned back one last time. You know where to find me. I'll be in the study, having tea just like your grandmother taught me. A month passed and autumn painted the Sullivan estate in shades of gold and crimson. I sat in the study, sipping tea from Mrs. Sullivan's favorite china cup, when Sarah dropped by with dinner. I still can't believe it, she said, settling into the armchair by the window. All those years you spent with their grandmother, none of us knew she was planning this. I smiled, remembering the quiet afternoons with the elderly woman who'd become more of a mother to me than a grandmother-in-law. She always said the best surprises come wrapped in patience. The doorbell rang, interrupting our conversation. Through the window, I spotted Marcus's car in the driveway. He'd been trying to reach me for weeks, leaving messages about wanting to talk, about making things right. Should I go? Sarah asked, but I shook my head. No, stay. Whatever he has to say, he can say it in front of my real family. Marcus looked different when I opened the door, humble somehow. The expensive watch was gone, replaced by the simple one I'd given him years ago. He carried a familiar wooden box under his arm. Emma, he said softly, can we talk? I led him to the study, where Sarah's presence clearly surprised him. He hesitated before sitting down, placing the box carefully on the desk. I found this in my office, he began. It's grandmother's recipe box. The one she used to keep all her special occasion dishes in. I thought you should have it. I recognized the box immediately. Mrs. Sullivan and I had spent countless hours going through those recipes, her elegant handwriting telling stories of family gatherings and holiday traditions. Megan left, he continued, his voice thick with regret. After the trust revelation, after everything came out, she said she didn't sign up for this kind of drama. He laughed bitterly. Turns out she was more interested in the Sullivan name than in me. I'm sorry, I said, and meant it. Despite everything, seeing him in pain didn't bring me joy. Jessica's different too, he added. The threat of losing those shares, it made her realize how close we came to destroying everything grandmother built. She's been going through old family photos, asking about the stories you and grandmother used to talk about. I poured another cup of tea, offering it to him out of habit. He took it, his hands shaking slightly. I was so wrong, Emma, about everything. I got caught up in the excitement of something new, something that made me feel young again. I forgot what real love looks like. Sarah shifted in her chair, a silent reminder of her presence and support. Your grandmother knew, I said quietly. She knew that love isn't about excitement or youth. It's about building something together, preserving what matters, creating a legacy worth protecting. Marcus nodded, tears in his eyes. Is there any way we can try again? I know I don't deserve it, but. No, I interrupted gently. We can't go back, Marcus. Your grandmother didn't create this trust to save our marriage. She did it to save her family's legacy. And that's what I intend to do. I opened the recipe box, pulling out a folded paper tucked between the pages. Look what I found last week. Her Christmas pudding recipe. The one she made every year. The one you and Jessica loved so much as children. His eyes lit up with recognition. I remember. She never wrote it down, said it had to be passed on in person. She taught it to me, I said softly. The Christmas before she died. Said someday I'd need to teach it to the next generation of Sullivans. Marcus wiped his eyes. You were always more of a Sullivan than I was. No, I corrected him. I just understood what it meant to be one. Your grandmother saw that. That's why she trusted me with this house, with these memories. Sarah reached over and squeezed my hand, a gesture that spoke volumes about true friendship and support. The holidays are coming up, I said, standing to walk Marcus to the door. I'll be making her Christmas pudding. You and Jessica are welcome to join us, not as husband and wife, but as family. That's what your grandmother would have wanted. Marcus paused at the doorway. Thank you, Emma, for preserving not just the house, but the heart of what grandmother built. After he left, Sarah and I returned to the study. The evening light filtered through the windows, casting warm shadows on the antique desk where Mrs. Sullivan and I had spent so many afternoons. You know, Sarah said, she'd be proud of you, not just for standing your ground, but for understanding what she was really protecting. I picked up the recipe box, running my fingers over its worn edges. Inside were more than just recipes. They were stories, traditions, pieces of a legacy that would live on through the generations. She used to say that a house is just walls and windows, I replied, but a home is built with love, understanding, and forgiveness. That's the real Sullivan legacy. As the sun set over the estate, I felt at peace. This house, these memories, this legacy, they were exactly where they belonged, and so was I. $250,000. Amanda's voice dripped with satisfaction through my phone. Way better than keeping your old junk locked away. You should be thanking me for finally doing something useful with it. I gripped my kitchen counter, my knuckles turning white as the magnitude of what she'd done hit me. My sister-in-law had just sold my entire family heirloom collection. Pieces that had been passed down through 5 generations. Pieces that told the story of my family's journey from Italy to America. My name is Sophia Rossi, and at 35, I just discovered that family isn't always who you think they are. Amanda, my brother Michael's wife of 3 years, had somehow accessed my climate-controlled storage unit while I was away at a conservation conference in Boston. The same storage unit where I kept my family's most precious possessions. Antique jewelry, hand-painted porcelain, rare books, and irreplaceable photographs. You had no right, I managed to say, my voice steadier than I felt. Those weren't yours to sell. Amanda's laugh was sharp and dismissive. Oh please, they were just collecting dust. Besides, the money will be much more useful. I'm thinking of buying a new car, something classic, like those stupid vases you use to fawn over. The irony of her words might have been funny if I wasn't fighting back tears. Those stupid vases were hand-painted by my great-grandmother, who brought them from Florence in 1932, wrapped in her wedding dress and carried across an ocean to start a new life. Where did you sell them? I asked, already opening my laptop to check the security footage. Amanda didn't know about the cameras I'd installed last year after a break-in attempt. The storage facility's own security was decent, but I'd wanted extra protection for my family's legacy. Some private collector, she said smugly. He knew the real value of things, unlike you. Paid cash too, smart man. I typed in my security login credentials, my fingers trembling slightly. And how exactly did you get into the storage unit, Amanda? There was a slight pause, the first crack in her confident facade. Michael gave me the key, of course. He is your brother, after all. The collection belongs to the whole family. Another lie. Michael had been traveling in Japan for the past month, completely unreachable due to a meditation retreat. He wouldn't be back for another week, and he'd never given anyone access to my storage unit. He respected what those heirlooms meant to me. The security footage loaded, showing clear images from multiple angles. I started with yesterday's feed, watching as Amanda approached the unit, but she wasn't alone. A tall man in an expensive suit walked beside her, gesturing animatedly. They reached my unit, and I leaned closer to the screen, my blood running cold as I watched Amanda pull out not a key, but what looked like a set of lock picks. "You broke in," I said, cutting off whatever excuse she was about to make. "I'm watching the footage right now, Amanda. You picked the lock." The silence on the other end was deafening. "Then, you're bluffing. There aren't any cameras in that place." I continued watching as they loaded box after box into a sleek black SUV. The man handed Amanda something, probably the cash she'd bragged about. The timestamp showed 3:47 p.m. yesterday. 3:47 p.m., I said quietly. Black SUV, license plate visible. "You're wearing your red blazer, the one Michael bought you for Christmas. Want me to continue?" "You little," she sputtered, her composure finally cracking. "Those things were wasted on you anyway. All you did was hide them away like some crazy collector. At least now they'll be appreciated." I thought about the hours I'd spent cataloging each piece, researching their history, documenting the stories behind them. The collection wasn't just valuable in terms of money. It was our family's history, tangible pieces of our past that connected us to our roots. "Here's what's going to happen," I said, my voice cold. "You're going to tell me exactly who you sold them to, or the police get this footage. Your choice." Amanda's laugh was desperate now. "You wouldn't dare. Michael would never forgive you for getting me arrested." "Michael would never forgive you for stealing our family's heritage," I countered. "But let's ask him, shall we? He lands in Tokyo in about 2 hours. I'm sure he'd love to see this footage." "You're bluffing," she said again, but I could hear the uncertainty in her voice. "Besides, the sale is done. What's done is done." I smiled, but she couldn't see it. "That's where you're wrong, Amanda. So very wrong. You see that man you sold our heirlooms to? He's about to learn some very interesting things about the legality of his purchase." I ended the call and immediately dialed Detective Martinez, my friend from college who now worked in the art crimes division. As the phone rang, I downloaded the security footage to my laptop, making sure to save multiple copies. Amanda had no idea what she just started. Those heirlooms weren't just valuable antiques, they were registered, documented pieces of cultural heritage. The sale wasn't just theft, it was a federal crime. My phone buzzed with a text from Amanda. "You're making a big mistake." I was trying to help the family. I ignored it, focusing instead on composing an email to Michael. My brother needed to know what his wife had done, and he needed to see it with his own eyes. The security footage would tell him everything he needed to know. The heirlooms might be gone for now, but Amanda was about to learn a harsh lesson about family, respect, and the consequences of underestimating the wrong person. I opened my files and began documenting everything, preparing for what would come next. This wasn't over, it was just beginning. Detective Martinez called me back within an hour. "Sophia, I've reviewed the footage. This is serious. We're not just talking about simple theft. The items she sold are registered with multiple cultural heritage databases." I sat in my study, surrounded by photographs of the collection, my own detailed catalog that Amanda hadn't known about. "What's our next step?" "I've already put out alerts to known dealers and auction houses," she explained. "Given the value and historical significance, this buyer won't be able to move these pieces without raising red flags. We've also got clear footage of both your sister-in-law and the buyer. The license plate is registered to a James Harrison." The name hit me like a thunderbolt. "Harrison?" "As in Harrison Fine Arts." "The same. He's known in our department, usually stays just within the law, but he's been suspected of dealing in questionably acquired pieces before. This time, though, he's made a mistake." I pulled up Harrison's website on my laptop. Sure enough, there he was, the same man from the security footage, standing smugly among his collection. My blood boiled seeing him there, knowing he had my family's treasures. My phone buzzed again. Another text from Amanda. "That collector already has plans for the pieces. You can't stop it now. Just take the money and be grateful." Before I could respond, another call came through. "Michael." My heart raced as I answered. "Hey, brother." "Sophia." His voice was tight, controlled. "I just got your email. Please tell me this isn't real. Please tell me Amanda didn't." "I'm looking at the footage right now," I said gently. I'm so sorry, Michael, but it's all true. There was a long silence, then a deep, shaky breath. I'm cutting my trip short. I'll be on the next flight home. Have you called the police? Better, I replied. Detective Martinez from Art Crimes is handling it. Michael, there's something else you should know. The buyer is James Harrison. The dealer? Michael's voice sharpened. Sophia, that man's reputation is terrible. If he's involved. I know, but we've got him on camera, paying cash for stolen goods. He can't wiggle out of this one. Just then, my email pinged. A message from an unknown address, but the subject line made my heart stop. Regarding your family collection. Urgent. I opened it, putting Michael on speaker as I read. Dear Ms. Rossi, I recently acquired some items that I believe might be of interest to you. While I purchased them in good faith, certain irregularities have come to my attention. Perhaps we could meet to discuss a mutually beneficial resolution. GH. He's scared, Michael observed. The alerts must have worked. Before I could reply, another email arrived. This one from Detective Martinez, marked urgent. Sophia, Harrison just tried to contact 3 different international buyers about recent acquisitions. All 3 have declined, citing our alerts. He's trapped and he knows it. Don't respond to any communication from him. Let him sweat. I smiled grimly. The net was closing in, but I knew Harrison wasn't our biggest problem. As if reading my thoughts, Michael spoke again. What about Amanda? Have you heard from her since? Just text trying to justify what she did. She doesn't know about Harrison's reputation or the legal implications yet. My doorbell rang, making me jump. Through the security camera, I saw Amanda standing there, looking considerably less confident than she had during our phone call. She's here, I told Michael. Want me to call you back? No, he said firmly. Keep me on speaker. I want to hear this. I opened the door to find Amanda clutching her designer purse like a shield. Her makeup couldn't quite hide how pale she was. We need to talk, she said, trying to sound authoritative but failing. That buyer, Harrison, he's been calling me nonstop. Something about documentation and provenance. Come in, I said coldly, stepping aside. Michael's on the phone. I'm sure he'd love to hear your explanation. She faltered, clearly not expecting this. Michael? But, you're in Japan. Not anymore. His voice came through the speaker, hard as steel. Start talking, Amanda, and don't even think about lying. She sank onto my couch, her bravado crumbling. I thought. The money was just sitting there in those old things, and we could use it for. For what? I interrupted. A new car. Some shopping sprees. Was that worth destroying our family's heritage? You don't understand, she protested weakly. Harrison said he'd pay cash, no questions asked. He said these kinds of private sales happen all the time. And now he's panicking because he can't sell them. I finished for her. Because every piece you stole is registered and documented. Every reputable dealer and auction house has been alerted. You didn't just commit theft, Amanda. You committed a federal crime. The color drained from her face. What? What do you mean? Michael's voice cut through the room. It means you're in serious trouble. Both you and Harrison. Where's the money, Amanda? She clutched her purse tighter. I'd already spent some of it. On deposits for what? Michael's voice was deadly quiet. For a yacht rental, she whispered. And a villa in Greece. The silence that followed was deafening. I looked at this woman, my sister-in-law, who had so casually destroyed something precious and irreplaceable for her own selfish desires. Detective Martinez will be here soon, I said finally. I suggest you tell her everything. Where Harrison took the pieces, any conversations you had with him, all of it. It might help reduce the charges. Charges? Amanda's voice rose in panic. You can't be serious. We're family. Family? Michael's voice cracked with emotion. Family doesn't steal from each other. Family doesn't destroy generations of heritage for a yacht rental. You stopped being family the moment you broke into that storage unit. Amanda started to cry, but I felt no sympathy. My phone buzzed with a text from Detective Martinez. Harrison's trying to leave the country. We've got eyes on him. Don't worry, those pieces aren't going anywhere. I showed the message to Amanda, watching as the last of her composure crumbled. The money, she said desperately. I can give back what's left. It was never about the money, I said quietly. But you never understood that, did you? The sound of police sirens in the distance made Amanda jump. Michael was silent on the phone, but I could hear his deep, controlled breathing. The nightmare wasn't over, but at least now we could see the path to making it right. As the sirens grew closer, I looked at the family photographs on my wall, 5 generations of history that Amanda had tried to erase with one greedy decision. She was about to learn that some things are worth more than money, and some betrayals can never be undone. The next few weeks passed in a blur of legal meetings and police interviews. Harrison, faced with overwhelming evidence, cracked first. He revealed the location of every piece from my collection, stored in a climate-controlled warehouse outside the city. He'd been planning to ship them overseas through various shell companies, but our quick action had frozen his entire operation. "We've recovered everything," Detective Martinez told me as we stood in the warehouse, surrounded by carefully packed crates. "Harrison's cooperating fully. He's more worried about his reputation than facing charges. He's offering to handle all costs for proper restoration and return shipping." I ran my hand over a familiar crate, knowing my great-grandmother's vases were inside. "And Amanda? She's accepted a plea deal." The prosecutor took into account that she returned most of the money and provided evidence against Harrison. "She's looking at probation, community service, and mandatory financial counseling." Michael hadn't spoken to Amanda since that day in my living room. He'd filed for divorce immediately upon returning from Japan, citing her criminal actions as grounds. The last I heard, she'd moved back in with her parents, her dreams of yachts and villas replaced by the harsh reality of legal fees and a ruined reputation. "The collection's cultural significance actually helped us," Martinez continued. "The federal charges scared Harrison straight. He's provided a full confession and documentation of similar deals he's made. The art crimes unit is having a field day." 2 days later, I stood in my storage unit, now equipped with a state-of-the-art security system. Harrison's involuntary contribution to making things right. Each piece was returned to its proper place, each family treasure back where it belonged. Michael helped me catalog everything, our hands gentle as we unpacked generations of memories. "You know what Mom used to say about these?" he asked, carefully unwrapping one of the vases. "She said they weren't just containers for flowers, they were vessels for stories. Each chip and crack was a chapter in our family's journey." I nodded, remembering our mother's voice as she taught us about our heritage. "She would have been proud of how we handled this," I said softly. "We protected what matters." The final piece we unpacked was a small, leather-bound diary that had belonged to our great-grandmother. Inside, written in fading Italian script, was the story of how she carried these treasures across an ocean, believing in a future she couldn't yet see. "Amanda never understood," Michael said, his voice heavy with emotion. "She saw dollar signs where we saw stories, market value where we saw memories." A month after everything was returned, I hosted a small gathering at my home. Family members from across the country came to see the collection, now displayed more securely but still as beautifully as ever. I'd hired an expert to help properly document each piece's history and significance, ensuring that future generations would understand their value beyond any price tag. Detective Martinez attended too, admiring the pieces she'd helped recover. "You know," she said, sipping her wine, "in all my years working art crimes, I've never seen someone so prepared. Those security cameras, the documentation, you made our job much easier." I smiled, thinking of all the precautions I'd taken that had seemed almost paranoid at the time. Sometimes the best defense is being ready for the worst. Later that evening, as the guests left and Michael helped me clean up, we found an envelope that had been slipped under my door. Inside was a letter from Amanda. "I'm sorry, I know those words aren't enough, but they're all I have. I didn't understand what I was destroying. Maybe I never will. The money's all been returned, not that it matters now. Some things, once broken, can't be fixed with cash." Michael read it once and then set it aside without comment. Some betrayals leave scars that no apology can heal. Standing in my study that night, surrounded by the treasures that had almost been lost, I felt a deep sense of peace. These pieces weren't just antiques or investments. They were our anchor to the past, our bridge to the future. Amanda's greed had threatened that legacy, but in protecting it, we'd grown stronger. The collection stands as a reminder now, not just of our family's journey, but of the importance of standing firm when what matters most is threatened. Some things are worth more than money, and some legacies are beyond price. 5 generations of stories, safely preserved for the next chapter to begin.